Yesterday, we talked a lot about what was at stake, and you already saw I just thought it was a raging madman who was speaking last night. But you see how important it is to really have an understanding. We are an education union, we are a healthcare union, we are a public services union. If our membership and our delegates don't have a deep understanding of what is against us and what the context is on all of these things, then how are we going to be able to have the conversations we need, whether they are in classrooms or whether they are in union halls? How do we have those conversations? We learn a lot, and frankly, I'm learning all the time, and one of the ways I'm learning is from scholars who I listen to and read and talk to all the time. And so what we have here today is a really remarkable group of people who are deeply involved in the work that is done on democracy and freedom and rights and civics. And so let me introduce them and then start asking them a bunch of questions. We're doing this for about 30 minutes, 30 or 40 minutes, I think. So let me introduce them, and then I'm going to go right into the questions, which is Erica Chenoweth, who is the person to my immediate left, is the Frank Stanton Professor of the First Amendment at Harvard Kennedy School. She's the faculty dean at Forheism House at Harvard, the Susan S. and Kenneth Wallach Professor at Harvard's Radcliffe Institute. Erica studies political violence and its alternatives. They have authored or edited 9 other books and dozens of articles on mass movements, nonviolent resistance, terrorism, political violence, revolutions, and state repression. And one of the reasons I'm reading their bio instead of talking about it, yes, let's applaud Erica. Yay! Is because I gush over these 4 people so much, I'd spend all the time gushing over them. Eric Holder, actually, let me do Danielle before Eric, because Danielle is to the immediate left of Erica. Danielle Allen is the James Bryant Conant University Professor at Harvard University. She is also director of the Allen Lab for Democracy Renovation at the Harvard Kennedy School and director of the Democratic Knowledge Project Learn, which is a research lab focused on civic education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and she's doing tremendous work on civics. And then there is our former Attorney General, Eric Holder, who served as the AG. I'm sure he has a lot of comments about the Department of Justice these days. From February 2009 to April 2015, as the 3rd longest serving AG in US history and the first African American to hold that office, Eric is an internationally recognized leader across a broad range of regulatory enforcement, criminal justice, and national security issues, and has done, in his post-AG life, has done so much in terms of fair redistricting and maps. And our last scholar here is a woman that I call literally every month, if not more, trying to really understand what's going on because of the lens of history and what she understands. And that is they're all professors, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who is a professor of history and Italian studies at New York University. She writes about fascism, authoritarianism, and propaganda, and the threats they present to democracies around the world. She is an advisor to Protect Democracy and to many civil and faith organizations. And by the way, they all have books, and those books are on the website, and I really commend them to you because of the teaching and the learning that they have and they can give all of us. So, these were the questions we wrote before yesterday. It does feel like what Hannah Arendt said were dark times. The constant drumbeats on the assaults, the constant assaults on democracy, on fundamental rights, on human decency and dignity, I mean, they feel overwhelming to us. So I just really kind of want you, all of you, because there's so much that we could talk about, but what is the thing? I know there are many, and I know this is really unfair, but what's like the most kind of important thing that is really keeping you up at night? And then, by the way, the next question I will ask them is what they're doing about it. But I want you to hear from them. What's like that most, what concerns you the most? Like when you got up this morning, what really concerns you? Who wants to start? Erica, you want to start? And I'll do it this way first, okay, and then that way.
Well, thank you so much, Randy. I just want to say a big shout out and thank you and hello to the AFT. And thank all the teachers and the teachers union and your locals and all of your folks for everything that you have been doing, everything you're doing here, and everything that you're going to be doing. It is needed more than ever, and thank God for you. Here's what I worried about this morning and that I've been worried about every morning for now many years. I've been worrying about what is a historical level of acute democratic backsliding in the United States of the kind that we have not seen in generations. And I am worried about the continued day-to-day consolidation of autocratic power in this country at the national level and at many state levels as well. I am worried that we will potentially miss a significant opportunity to influence the speed and scope and scale of that consolidation through the 2026 midterm elections. And I am equally concerned that we might over-index on that election when it comes to understanding the totality of ways that we can influence our political environment and bring the country to a better place. So what I see is a lively, vibrant, powerful set of actors across our civil society who are committed to making sure that the country gets to a better place. And what I hope and what I'll encourage is that we become more than the sum of our parts, that we build something new and different through what we already have, which are the ingredients to bring our country to a better place where freedom, dignity, and people's rights are respected, and that is true across the board, and that opportunities are available to everyone. We have everything we need, and all that is needed is for us to link together, express our power, and become more than the sum of our parts.
Can I just do a follow-up? Because Erica's work, Maria Stephan and Erica's work, a lot of people quote in this room. I know I was looking for Jessica Tang and Mary Catherine Ricker. You have a number, 3.5%. Could you just explain what that is, since a lot of people use it?
Sure. So you might have heard of the 3.5% rule. The 3.5% rule is just an observation, a descriptive observation, that in one study that Maria Stephan and I did from 1900 to 2006, There were no mass nonviolent movements for democracy that failed after mobilizing at least 3.5% of the population at a peak moment. Now, what I want to also, that's an exciting statistic because it suggests that those who are activated don't need to constitute the majority. They can influence easily and gain sympathy among the majority by showing their commitment and engaging in many different creative nonviolent actions. But I also want to caution against the overuse of that number as like a target for a few reasons. The first is that it's a historical observation, but it is not a prediction. It's not a prescription or a guarantee. And that since our book was published and I first was able to identify that number, there have been cases around the world where people have actually succeeded in mobilizing that level and the movement still failed. And so I think that the lesson to learn is similar in that when mass movements organize sufficient numbers, they are able to shift the loyalties of just enough people in order to influence an outcome. That is still true and is still the sort of theory of change here. And so the main thing to think about is with every action that we take, how are we mobilizing people who otherwise wouldn't necessarily be with us? So organizing others into a movement to create that threshold or kind of tipping point that would allow us to express our power in an impactful way.
Danielle.
Well, first of all, again, thank you, Randi. Thank you to all of you educators, and especially I want to call out our great social studies educators in the room. Thank you. All the work you are doing, giving these kids civic muscle, it is so important. These are dark times. For me personally, as I try to process that, my own family history matters a lot. It matters to me that my granddad helped found one of the first NAACP chapters in Northern Florida in the 40s. Some of you know what Northern Florida is like, right? Same thing as Southern Georgia. Lynchings were on the rise at the time, so he was taking his life into his hands. My great-grandparents fought for women's right to vote. My great-granddad marched with suffragists on Boston Common in 1917. And we often forget that that year, that was a really hard year too. Woodrow Wilson had troops in the streets of DC, right? Sound familiar? Suppressing the protests of suffragists. And they made it through, right? Dark times, and they made it through. So I know we can too. That's just the first thing I want to just say and name. You asked what keeps me up at night. It's basically this. I am a historian. Look at 18th century, 19th century, 20th century. Also look at other countries around the globe. I looked at cases of concentration of power, executive overreach, the question of what do you do about it. And as best as I can tell, it boils down to two things. Fight corruption and broaden the suffrage. Now, broaden the suffrage, that just means make sure everybody has a meaningful vote, right? Those two things, fight corruption, broaden the suffrage. We are watching corruption at unprecedented scales in our country right now. Billions of dollars that are being acquired through office being used for the sake of that. That means office is not being used to solve the problems of ordinary people. It's as simple as that. Corruption is why we don't have solutions to problems of housing, to problems of affordability, and the like. Now, about that meaningful vote, we need to be aware that 60 million Americans no longer have a meaningful vote in federal elections because of gerrymandering, because of closed primaries. 60 million Americans, that's a quarter of the electorate. All right, so fight corruption, broaden the suffrage. Now, that sounds easy, so what keeps me up at night is how do we build a tent big enough to make people power the decisive fact in a world where capital has concentrated power and is crawling all over our institutions? What does that path to that big tent? And I think, honestly, that's going to be kind of hard for us because sometimes it means we got to give up maybe some of our favorite ways of talking or some of our really pressing personal issues a little bit, like try to give a little bit in order to make that tent really big. And I don't know how to do that yet. So that's the thing that keeps me up at night.
Thank you, Danielle. General Holder, I thought of you, the first person I thought of was when I saw the Calais decision. Because you had to live through Shelby. and you predicted this, but what keeps you, and so I'm sure there's many things that keep you up at night, but what keeps you up at night?
Well, again, I want to thank you for inviting me, Randy, and I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you all for what it is that you do. You all have the most important job in our society, and so you do it well, so thank you. What keeps me up at night is the way in which the midterm elections are going to be conducted. There's a ton of stuff that keeps me up at night. So this is just the one that's at kind of the front of the line. There's a whole bunch of other things. But the folks who, I'm a Democrat, I'm a partisan Democrat and proud of that. And what I worry about with regard to Trump and the Republicans is that they're going to do anything that they can, anything, to cheat, to rig the election, to come up with a result that's inconsistent with the desires of the American people through gerrymandering, through voter suppression, through the deployment of ICE in certain communities, declaring an emergency of some sort to try to justify the use of troops. All these things, 18 months ago might have seemed fanciful, no way that could possibly happen. I put everything on the table with regard to what these people are capable of doing, and so we've got to be prepared to respond in kind. But that's the thing that keeps me up. If it's a fair election, we're going to do fine. We're going to do fine. I think there's a wave. There's going to be a wave. The House of Representatives should come our way. We'll make great progress, I think, in state legislatures, which we need to focus on to a much greater degree than we do. The Senate is certainly in play. But I really worry, if you shave 1-2% through the mechanisms that they might use, voter participation by just 1-2%, that can be outcome determinative. And I worry about that in certain states. So what it is that they're going to do, and that speech that we saw last night, as crazy as it was, as error-filled as it was, could serve as the basis for, or the beginning shot, and serve as the basis for the kinds of conduct, the kinds of practices that they might try to put in place that, again, 18 months or so ago, I would have said, that's not possible. That's what keeps me up.
Thank you, General. Ruth.
So it's very moving to be here to speak with you, and thank you all for what you do every day. It's so important, so to all of you. And so as somebody who studies for many years the worst people in the world, all of this is kind of a nightmare to see it happening in our own country. I just want to get one concept out for our thinking. We think about authoritarianism as in a legalistic way, and it is that, when the executive branch destroys the rule of law and politicizes institutions. But there's something else going on, and it deserves a different definition, and it is when you either erode or diminish or destroy the rights of the many to allow the very few, this takes up from your speech, to allow the very few unheard of liberties and freedoms to plunder. And this word plunder and exploitation is key. And we're living through this right now. The plunder of institutions, the plunder of the economy, where your tax dollars are like a goodie pot for Trump to funnel to himself, plunder the environment, plunder the labor force, and plunder female bodies, so they're covering up the Epstein files. And so that keeps me up at night to be witnessing this process, because it is a process. And then more specifically, the retooling of institutions to fit the personal financial needs and psychological needs for vengeance of the leader. You see that this is called personalist rule, and Trump is doing that. So everybody's at his beck and call. There are constant loyalty tests. This is what I call moral collapse. So that keeps me up at night. And then as an educator, the destruction of truth, the demonization of all categories of people, from scientists, researchers, teachers, who deal with verifiable facts, who uphold the dignity of telling the truth. And it's been across the board an attempt to make trusted authorities, such as teachers, librarians, doctors, make them into objects of suspicion. So that removal of trust, and of course it goes with the leader stuff, because only the leader should be trusted. I alone can fix it, right? That's what he told us. So that kind of frame, but keep aware of this, destroying the rights of the many so that the very few have freedoms to plunder. The Musks, the Secretary of Commerce, and Trump and his family himself.
I asked them what keeps them up at night as opposed to so much of the things that are confronting the country, because part of what authoritarians do, and also part of what Donald Trump does, whether you consider him an authoritarian or not, is the throwing out of so much stuff that people just throw up their hands and say, oh no, what are we going to, all I want to do is stay home, and for those of us who drink, have a glass of wine, or for me, some vodka.
See?
But
We knew vodka would come up.
But the question really becomes for us, and this is why I really wanted the second question to do, we, as a labor union, we have done a lot in terms of bargaining and in terms of the use of the bullhorn. We've done a lot. And as Danielle knows, Danielle is on our the Shanker Institute board, that the work of civics teachers, the work of social studies teachers, the work of elementary school teachers who also teach civics, it's really important in terms of that engagement and being able to teach kids in a developmentally appropriate way how to think and how to understand context. But the question now, in the next few months, we have effectively 100 days. And Raphael Warnock, Reverend Warnock, Senator Warnock yesterday was here, and he had actually the end of his speech, he talked about a snake near death convulsing. And it looks really scary, but that is a convulsion nearing death. And it's been something I thought about this morning, waking up, because if you think about how Trump looked yesterday. So from your vantage point, you have the leadership of our union here. Almost 1.88 million people, 1.3 of whom live in a battleground state. What do you recommend? What do you think we should be doing in between now and November 3rd? I'll start. Actually, you know something, General? I'm going to start with you this time, because I'm going to start with you.
Well, I think first off, we have to understand that we have power. That is the thing that I think is in some ways the most important thing. That it seems that these folks are all powerful, that they have control of all of these institutions, and they do to a certain extent, but you can never forget, and if you're conversant with American history, you understand the power of individuals, the power of organizations, who are not necessarily power holders in a traditional sense. If you look at the 250th anniversary, I mean, a bunch of ragtag colonial folks decided to take on the mightiest empire in the world and form this nation. We ended slavery when that didn't seem like it was likely to happen, or at least not in that time frame. Women got the right to vote. Again, something that was not deemed to happen simply because it was its time. It happened because people fought for it. a bunch of young kids, black and white, went to the South, or from the South, and ripped down a system of American apartheid. And they must have had doubts. Dr. King, Diane Nash, John Lewis must have thought to themselves, can we really do this? They must have had those doubts on a Sunday evening, and yet they pushed ahead, understanding the power that they had by galvanizing people to get into the streets, to get into the voting booths. Those are the kinds of things that I think we have to do now. Understand the power that we have and then exercise it. Greg Bavino and his fascists in Minneapolis didn't leave because they accomplished their job. They got their asses kicked out of there by the people of Minneapolis who said, we don't accept this. And that, I think, is an object lesson for us to keep in mind. What is it that we do? Well, we do all the things that have been done in the past. We understand the power that we have, and then you all, given the power that you have, get more people involved in this effort. This is a numbers game. This is a numbers game. If more of us come out than on the other side, we will ultimately win. That keeps me optimistic. But there's work to be done. The fact that we have power is not in and of itself determinative. The question is, will we use that power? And that's what we have to do.
All right, so I'll jump in. I'm taking off my professor hat and putting on my citizen hat. I want to be real clear about that, okay? There's a great senator from my home state who says, don't agonize, organize. You all know how to do that. You are organizers par excellence. I know you will do that. The thing I want to ask is that in addition to working on Congress and the midterms, which are so important, and you know in those swing states what you have to do, pay attention to state elections, all right? Our state legislatures build this country. They build it for health policy, they build it for education, they build it for the election system. They will control representation and districting in 2030 through the census. Focus on state legislatures. Arizona, there's good work happening to address the voucher situation there, right? Horses out of the barn, but we got to actually control what happens with that voucher structure. We need work targeted there. Wisconsin, got to win the governor's race and got to deal with the messy legislative situation there in Wisconsin. Pennsylvania, flip the Senate. We can flip the Senate in Pennsylvania. That controls the budget in Pennsylvania. Ohio, fight the Freedom Caucus. All right, so those are the four things. OPPO, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio. We need your work in those state legislatures. Okay.
One thing I would say, and this is I'm glad that you said that because, too often we focus on Congress and the federal government. The reality is that on a day-to-day basis, your life is more impacted by what happens in state legislatures, state Supreme Courts, governors, than what happens here. Congress has done crap for the last, 18 months, and all the laws that we're fighting, all the things that affect our liberties in substantial ways happen at the state level. So I think that point is extremely well taken.
I love when somebody comes in and says, these states are what we really need to focus on. Ruth.
Yeah, so, we have to understand our own power, respect our own power, that was said. But the flip is that we should never see these authoritarians as infallible.
Right.
They spend a lot of money and effort to boost their personality cults. That's what Trump's face everywhere, all that crap is about. And it's because they live in fear of us. And Trump is already at the bunker stage, which I call. He's talking, the Washington Post did an investigation of what has he talked about the most for the last 4 months. Well, guess what it was? His ballroom and his bunker. And the ballroom is where he gets his adulation, but the bunker is where he's going to hide. And Putin, all these guys have their bunkers. And so he talks about the military hospital. That's where he's going to hide and flee. So they live in fear of us. And so we have a power. And that's why they're trying to take away our voice through taking away our vote. And so never, ever give up on elections. And I like that there's the Democracy Defender Initiative. A accompanying people to vote, all these kind of mutual aid and assistant things, we're going to need to do that. And there are great precedents in our history. We don't even have to look abroad for that. So never forget your own power, and never forget that these guys live in fear of you.
And Ruth knows this because she has studied so many of them. Erica.
Yeah, so my colleague Steve Levitsky says that there are 3 places that we need to fight back against democratic backsliding: in the courts, in the streets, and at the polls. I would add in the pocketbook and in the boardroom. And the polls are the place where everybody over 18 who's a citizen in this country gets to express in a popular way their views about where we are headed. And they can do that in their local elections, in their state elections, and in our federal elections. And in situations where we anticipate a contested result, the more decisive the result, the better. And so this is a very important election for expressing an overpowering popular majority of no. Enough of this, right? Just enough. And then what we need to do is not forget those other domains in which authoritarian consolidation is also happening: in the courts, in the streets, in boardrooms, and in the pocketbook. And so what I would say is that unions have such an absolutely critical role, including this one, in providing the backbone, the skills, the resources, and the capacity and know-how to help to lead and guide what is going to be our own version of what we saw in South Africa, what we saw in Chile, what we saw in our own civil rights movement, what we have seen around the world in South Korea, in Hungary, and in other places, our own united democracy and freedom alliances. And these unions have bargaining experience that no other parts of our civil society have. They have organizing capacity, not seen anywhere else. They have the power of labor, right? And the ability to wield it in ways that can help to express that power in given moments too. And guess what? They're also highly popular, right? They're one of the only civic institutions that carry that moral legitimacy, and that within themselves are often a big tent. So I would say lean in to the fact that you're in a union and bring others along right now. This is the moment to keep that 1.88 million getting even more, and then use what you've got. You've got the power. We have everything we need in this country. We need to sync up and link up and express it together at the same time.
So I have one last question for each one of you, which is this. I know what you're all going to say about the importance of voting. But how do we, and this is the question that every local leader has had to face. There's people in the room in a union meeting when somebody says, we should vote for Amy Acton in Ohio. And then someone in the room says, they've done nothing for us. I know, I'm using the example. So what's your best advice from everything that you know? How do we convince people to get off the couch? How do we actually, I know Danielle already said, it's hard to get to the big tent. But how do we convince people to get off the couch?
I think we're in a moment where we have to start through relationships in a deep way. It's not about an argument. It's about, I am here to ask you for a favor because it matters that much to me and you care about me.
Yep.
So then that means you have to really figure out who do you have where you can call in a favor like that and tell, I don't care that you feel disenchanted. I don't care that you feel like the party hasn't done that much for us. This candidate is not the same as the party. okay? There's always a difference between the candidate and the party. B, we can hold the candidate accountable. And C, I am asking you for a favor. So that, that relationship piece, and we all have bigger relationships than we are currently activating. So that's where I would start. And we just got to make that ask at a personal level, heart to heart.
Anybody else?
My friend Rebecca Solnit sometimes says that voting is like a chess move, not a Valentine. And I really like that orientation to where if people feel uninspired by a candidate, to understand that sometimes voting is about picking the opponent that you want to struggle against and influence rather than picking one's ideal preferred one. And if that's the setting in which one finds oneself, sometimes that is one of the arguments that might land.
What I would say, in a nice way, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But say that in a nice way. The reality is non-participation at this time, given the alternatives. Even if you don't think that the Democrats have given you all that you think you should have, understand what the Republicans have done and are prepared to do. You want greater participation, you want greater rights for working people. Look at what the Republicans have done. Look at what the Republicans have done. If you care about reproductive rights, look at what the Republicans have done. There is a contrast, a stark contrast, one that is more stark now than perhaps it's ever been, certainly in my lifetime. And the notion that you would not participate is something that's offensive to me. People died, sacrificed, committed themselves so that we would have opportunities to express ourselves politically that they did not. You dishonor the work of people who gave their lives so that we would have these choices. Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman, those 3 kids in Mississippi gave their lives. Viola Liuzzo, Dr. King, all of these folks and others unknown to us who sacrificed. If you now say that I'm not going to participate, you're saying that their work was done in vain. And that, for me, is not something that is acceptable at all. So understand the contrast and understand the responsibility that you have. You have to honor the past and prepare this nation for the future. And the way we do that is by participating.
Yeah. Ruth. Thank you, Eric.
I was writing the same thing that the Attorney General just said. It's one, you have to be honoring the past, but we have to be thinking about what kind of future we want. What are the stakes of this moment to determine our future? And it's really, for me, about human rights. It's why I threw that out about that our rights are restricted, our dignity is taken away, so that the very few, the billionaires, the Musks, can just plunder everything. And it's across the board. So I think it's important to appeal to people's sense of dignity, to talk about moral collapse. We're seeing it every day. And the necessity of moral renewal. And I don't mean this necessarily in a religious way. It's a decency thing. Beyond political parties, because many people are disaffected with the Democratic establishment. This isn't about party. This is about what you do in your communities, for the future of this nation. And so that, I think, framing it for people in that broad way and yet essential humanist way is really important.
So, in thanking our panel here, I said this to you before, but in the app, under the hamburger button, you can also find the information about the books that these amazing people have written. Our Unfinished Bit March by Eric Holder, Radical Duke by Danielle Allen, Strongmen, Mussolini to Present by Ruth Ben-Ghiat. They all have a lot of books. And Civil Resistance, What Everyone Needs to Know by Erica Chenoweth. Before I knew Erica, Sharon and I had that book in our home. And so I want to say to all four of them, and I hope you all, in this very quick snapshot, understand that history and the scholars, not only who study it, but the practitioners who work at it and work at making our government better, they have a lot to teach us, and they taught us a lot today. So thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Thank you, Professor Allen. Thank you, Professor Ghiat. And thank you, Professor Chenoweth. Thank you.